The Senate chamber was supposed to be quiet that morning. The committee hearing on judicial oversight had already stretched into its third hour, and most observers assumed it would be another routine session, politicians posturing, lawyers testifying, cameras rolling. But what no one expected was the explosive confrontation that would make headlines around the world. Senator Josh Hawley leaned forward in his chair, his voice sharp and impatient. "This is not a courtroom drama, Congresswoman," he snapped, glaring at Representative Jasmine Crockett, who had been invited as a guest speaker on constitutional integrity. "This is the United States Senate, and you're out of line." The words echoed across the marble room like a gavel slam. Reporters froze. Assistants exchanged startled glances. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. But Jasmine didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice or roll her eyes. She simply adjusted her glasses, folded her hands on the table, and waited until the silence grew uncomfortable. Then, in a tone so calm it was almost disarming, she said, "Senator, I've spent my career being told I was out of line whenever I refused to be silent in the face of injustice. If asking hard questions makes me out of line, then perhaps the line needs to be redrawn." The room erupted, not in noise, but in a collective gasp. Cameras zoomed in. Phones began buzzing as staffers frantically texted colleagues outside the chamber. Her reply was calm, but it carried the weight of centuries of silenced voices, and it landed like a thunderclap. The build-up. It hadn't started that morning. Tensions between Hawley and Crockett had been brewing for weeks. Crockett, a first-term congresswoman known for her sharp wit and fearless questioning, had been increasingly vocal about judicial ethics. Hawley, an ambitious senator with a reputation for fiery speeches, considered her criticisms not only disruptive but personal. That day, the hearing was focused on judicial accountability, an issue Hawley wanted to control. He had prepared to dominate the session, his binders full of highlighted notes, his soundbites rehearsed for television. But Jasmine was not there to play a supporting role. When it was her turn to speak, she began methodically. She quoted the Constitution, cited historical precedents, and calmly laid out her concerns about double standards in judicial oversight. Her tone wasn't aggressive, it was surgical, deliberate, precise. And that, ironically, made Hawley angrier. He thrived on fiery exchanges, but her refusal to rise to his bait threatened his control of the narrative. The flashpoint. It was when Jasmine drew a direct comparison between judicial privilege and political hypocrisy that Hawley exploded. "Some people in positions of power," she said, looking directly at him without raising her voice, "believe accountability is only for their opponents and never for themselves. That is not democracy, it's selective justice." Hawley slammed his hand on the desk. "You're out of line, Congresswoman. This is not your platform for grandstanding." The entire room tensed. Even veteran senators shifted uncomfortably. His shout had crossed from political theater into raw anger. But Jasmine didn't match his volume. She leaned slightly forward and spoke so softly that the microphones had to catch her words. "Senator, the line between grandstanding and truth-telling often depends on who benefits from the silence. I will not be silent." The viral moment. CSPAN's live feed captured every second. By the time the hearing ended, clips of the exchange were already circulating online. On Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram, Jasmine's calm reply spread like wildfire. One video captioned, "The calm before the storm," gained 2 million views in the first hour. Another user clipped her line, "Perhaps the line needs to be redrawn," and set it to dramatic music. It became an instant rallying cry. By lunchtime, hashtags like #OutOfLine and #CrockettClapback were trending nationwide. Memes flooded social media. Jasmine calmly sipping water with the caption, "Unbothered," while Hawley's red face was paired with the words, "Triggered." Political commentators jumped in. Cable news networks replayed the exchange on loop. Late-night hosts teased that Hawley had walked right into a verbal buzzsaw. But beyond the entertainment value, something deeper was resonating. Jasmine's words spoke to a broader frustration: how often women, especially women of color, were told they were out of line, simply for speaking up. The aftermath inside the chamber. After the exchange, the hearing stumbled on, but the energy had shifted. Senators who had been half asleep were now wide awake, whispering to aides and checking their phones. Even the witnesses seemed rattled. Hawley, still fuming, tried to return to his notes, but the weight of the viral storm outside the chamber was already seeping in. He kept glancing at his phone, where notifications lit up like fireworks. He could sense it. He had lost control of the narrative. Meanwhile, Jasmine remained composed. She asked her remaining questions with the same steady tone, as though nothing unusual had happened. But her staffers knew, they had just witnessed a turning point in her career. When the session adjourned, reporters swarmed her in the hallway. "Congresswoman Crockett, how do you respond to Senator Hawley's comments? Did you expect your reply to go viral so quickly? Do you think this moment will define your political future?" Jasmine paused, then gave the same calm smile she'd shown in the chamber. "I don't think about what goes viral. I think about what's right. If standing up for accountability makes me out of line, then I'm comfortable being out of line." The next morning, Washington, D.C. woke up to a political firestorm. Every major newspaper carried the story. The Washington Post headline read, "Hawley explodes, Crockett responds with calm fire." The New York Times noted, "A viral lesson in power and poise." Even tabloids splashed her face across their covers, portraying her as both a fighter and a symbol of composure. Cable networks couldn't get enough. CNN hosted a panel where one commentator declared, "Crockett just showed America what grace under pressure looks like." Fox News, by contrast, tried to spin the moment as a disrespectful stunt. But the clip itself, played repeatedly, spoke louder than the spin. The public reacts. On TikTok, young activists began using Jasmine's words as a soundtrack for their own videos. College students, civil rights advocates, even nurses and teachers, people across professions recorded themselves saying, "If asking hard questions makes me out of line, then perhaps the line needs to be redrawn." One viral meme showed Rosa Parks refusing to give up her seat, paired with Jasmine's words, reminding everyone that, out of line, has always been the accusation thrown at those who dare to resist. By noon, #OutOfLine challenge had begun. People filmed themselves calmly standing their ground in everyday conflicts, at workplaces, classrooms, even at family dinners, and tagged Jasmine Crockett as inspiration. She hadn't planned any of this, but overnight, she had become a symbol. Hawley's counterattack. Meanwhile, Josh Hawley wasn't about to let the moment define him as the villain. His team scrambled into damage control. That same afternoon, he went live on Fox News to set the record straight. "She came here to grandstand, to lecture the Senate like it's her personal stage," Hawley thundered. "I don't apologize for standing up for order. If we let Congresswoman Crockett turn every hearing into a circus, then the American people lose." But his attempt backfired. Clips of his TV appearance were quickly juxtaposed with Jasmine's measured tone from the day before. The contrast was brutal, his red face and raised voice against her steady calmness. Even some of his usual supporters quietly admitted he looked rattled. Jasmine's silence speaks loudest. In stark contrast, Jasmine didn't rush to interviews. She didn't tweet aggressively or bask in the limelight. Her only post was a simple line on Twitter. "Silence has never protected the truth." It was retweeted 100,000 times within hours. Commentators marveled at her strategy, or lack of it. By refusing to engage in the mudslinging, she looked even more composed. Late-night comedians couldn't resist the story. One joked, "Josh Hawley tried to shout down Jasmine Crockett, but it turns out calm beats volume every time." Another quipped, "Hawley said she was out of line. Sir, the only thing out of line is your temper." A ripple beyond politics. The confrontation began spilling beyond politics. Teachers brought up the viral clip in classrooms to discuss rhetoric and respect. Corporate trainers used it in seminars about conflict resolution. Pastors quoted Jasmine's words in Sunday sermons about courage. Even international media picked it up. A British newspaper ran the headline, "American Congresswoman Silences Senator with Just 15 Words." In South Africa, a radio host played the clip on air and said, "This is what dignity sounds like." Jasmine's staff, overwhelmed by calls and emails, realized they had stumbled into something bigger than a soundbite. They had a movement on their hands. The second confrontation. 2 weeks later, another hearing was scheduled. Anticipation buzzed through the Capitol. Would there be another clash? Would Hawley try to reassert himself? The room was packed with reporters, more than usual for such a dry policy session. Camera crews jostled for angles. Social media users tuned into the livestream, waiting for sparks. When Jasmine entered, the flash of cameras lit up the chamber. Hawley, seated across the room, kept his expression stone cold. This time, though, the tone shifted. When Jasmine spoke, her words were deliberate but pointed. She didn't address Hawley directly, she addressed the issue, the nation, the people watching. Accountability isn't out of line, she said firmly. It is the foundation of democracy. And if we forget that, then the chaos doesn't come from voices like mine. It comes from silence. Hawley clenched his jaw but didn't interrupt. The viral memory of his outburst hung over him like a shadow. Cameras caught him fiddling with his pen, visibly restraining himself. Jasmine finished her statement, closed her binder, and leaned back. The room felt the shift. The balance of power had tilted. The legacy of a moment. By the end of the month, what began as a heated outburst had turned into one of the defining viral moments of the year. Jasmine Crockett was invited to speak at universities, civil rights events, and leadership conferences. She was suddenly being discussed as a future Senate candidate, or even more. As for Hawley, he found himself on the defensive. For every supporter who applauded his toughness, dozens mocked his inability to handle a calm opponent. The phrase, "you're out of line," became shorthand online for politicians losing their cool. But Jasmine never gloated. When asked in an interview how she felt about becoming a viral sensation, she smiled softly. "I didn't go in there looking for a viral moment. I went in there looking for justice. If people saw something in my calmness that inspired them, then I'm grateful. But the real work isn't in the clips. It's in the change we still have to fight for." Her words, once again, carried farther than any shout. Epilogue months later, when analysts reviewed the biggest political moments of the year, the clip still stood out. Not because it was dramatic, but because it revealed something deeper. That in an age of constant noise, composure could be revolutionary. And so, one line from a heated Senate chamber lived on. "If asking hard questions makes me out of line, then perhaps the line needs to be redrawn." It was no longer just a reply to Josh Hawley. It was a rallying cry for anyone who had ever been told to sit down, stay quiet, or stop questioning.